Welcome back to Season 2 of In the Middle of It, a podcast about participation culture.
Join us out in the field as we explore what it really takes to grow participation culture in communities.
I'm Sissy Rock.
I'm Lucy Mary Mulholland.
And I'm Duncan Matthews. In the Middle of It, Season 2 starts now.
Let's go.
We're trying to create that network so that when the idea comes up, it has a place to land and grow. So what does it take to have this network happening?
I wonder if there's something about having space where community can come together to do that work around what is meaningful to us, but it's not the place where the plans happen. The plans happen in those little small pockets of people organising things. That's where things come into actuality, into something real.
Welcome back.
It's episode 2.
Season 2.
2.2.
Of In the Middle of It.
So last time I said this episode was going to be called The Turmoil because it's really building on from that idea of trying to get traction and then all the things, the dilemmas that are inside of us and are in the project. And often this is a moment that can be quite a low ebb when you're in a project, right? You've set stuff up, you feel like you're on your way, and then reality hits you. You really are in the middle of it. There's turmoil. How does that land with you, Lucy Mary, when I say that?
Yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about. I think it's holding that tension between something that you're trying to activate and also being respectful and honouring the rhythms and pace and the flow of this community that, as you know, some things move really fast in one place and not in another. And how you sort of hold that tension between the two is, a constant dance, hey?
What about you, Duncan?
Yeah, I've been working with the tension of the turmoil, of how much do we get involved with the turmoil within the groups versus sitting around the groups and letting them own and take care of their own turmoil. Is there layers, or are we integrated in part of their team, or what's the context we want the weavers to be working in, and how do we reinforce and support that context while being there when needed?
I was thinking more about my own turmoil, like my own questioning of some of the assumptions that I've made and the pressures I've put on myself or the pressures I'm putting on other people. What would I have done differently? Where do I feel like I've been really naive? Where am I imagining that people want me to perform in a certain way that I haven't? Last season I was Googling praxis. Turmoil, a state of confusion, disorder, uncertainty, or great anxiety. And I actually have felt all of those things in this project.
I think a lot of what I've noticed about my own process through this is how to sit in that turmoil and try and flip it into creative tension, how to sort of not freak out in that space and try and find a way of balancing those energies.
Yeah, and one of the things about this podcast, we wanted to be able to show the inner workings. Often you're at a conference, there's a PowerPoint, and you sort of sit there and you go, must have been things that didn't work, and I don't want to just talk about this project, this pilot, as if we're looking for funding. I want people to really get hold of it, because I'm sure any of us who've ever worked in projects know that there is this moment where you feel even despondent sometimes.
I often sit in this turmoil of, we've got all these amazing digital tools which could help us do this work so easily. Or you realize that actually a flyer in the letterbox or a poster is much more effective than social media, no matter how polished we can make it. And so really trying to find that balance between old school, new school, cheap digital, pushing stuff out widely versus comparatively expensive pieces of paper which somebody has to go and put in your letterbox, and finding the balance, finding what works, finding what cuts through. A lot of that's about context, about who we're working with, the location, what else they're surrounded by, as well as my own preferences to make everything digital.
And so that's the sort of thing you're thinking about when you're thinking about turmoil.
It's one of the things I'm thinking about.
Right. I guess I was thinking more in the lines of, like me and you, Duncan, had sat around and thought, what would happen if you had this group of people come into a community and work really intensively? And that there'd been assumptions in that about them being a team, about the impact of having, 3 people all out there working together, doing the engaging. And actually, it hasn't necessarily worked like that. Often, one person seems to be doing a bit more admin-y stuff. I'm imagining in my mind that it would be 75% engagement, and 25% admin, but it's not quite like that. The other things that cause me
turmoil.
Yeah, I get a bit anxious, and then I notice I want to come down hard. Come on. And I don't think that that's helpful. Having had people come down hard on me, I know that makes me less creative, not more creative.
One of the things that I've been really wrestling with is how to continue working on creating the conditions rather than trying to drive specific things. But there's other times when it's sort of like, okay, the fact that this is happening is a sign that there's some nutrient missing from the garden. There's something that maybe we need to bring into our process that would change this thing happening. So rather than sort of hitting it head on, trying to work more indirectly to try and shift this in a way that feels more organic, but is still acknowledging that something needs to shift.
I like that. So you're saying, that's just a symptom. What's the cause?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's been the other wrestling I've found in myself is how much to lead and how much to step back. For some teams, it's been really clear that they're moving, they're organizing themselves, they've got ideas, they're going for it. And I'm kind of more just sort of supporting from behind and sort of holding those edges. And then other teams are just, needing at times, can you just help us work out our next steps? Like we need more direction and sort of feeling for those when to step forward, when to step back. It's that constant process of reflection and noticing, being fluid rather than being the sort of, this is how I'm going to lead.
I think we had an idea, Sissy, that our weavers would form strong groups that would support each other, generate lots of ideas amongst themselves, really become a centre of energy or driving of energy within our neighbourhoods. And the way that these groups have formed has been different in each location. And some of the groups have formed really well together, but then we've felt that tension, the turmoil of being a little bit left out. Whereas other groups have perhaps not coalesced as well together, and we're a lot more involved in the dynamics of the group themselves. I'm not sure that that's something we really expected or thought too much about ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think there's a danger of not taking a whole step back and saying, hold on, was this even realistic, what we were thinking? What are the conditions way back that would have created a different something that you can't tell at the moment? So it's not really about the people and the roles. It's more about the system that we've created and what that generates. And I try and get hold of what were the conditions where I have seen things work before that I imagine could be recreated, and how come they can't be recreated. I'll go back to this thing that I was facilitating, this workshop that I was facilitating, and everyone had masks on, because they were being COVID safety, which I think is great. It wasn't until I sort of woke up the morning after running this workshop where I felt like I couldn't quite get the vibe, and I thought, it's because the signals were literally masked, right? So what are the signals that you're getting? What are all the inputs that you're getting? And I guess that's what I'm thinking about here, not so much the people and the roles, but what are the inputs that are needed to generate the vibe that you need? Maybe we're missing some of them.
I guess what I'm thinking is it does really lift up that thing of these assumptions around different skill sets, and that we kind of have assumptions around maybe what it takes to be a weaver and all the different things that we think go into that. But that also there's building awareness around a weaver team. Yeah, what are all the different skill sets required to be a self-organising team that's got momentum, ability to self-reflect and direct themselves, or what support they need. So kind of thinking about the team as an entity, as well as the individuals, as well as the community, is that unique system on 3 levels.
I mean, I keep on thinking about when I lived in Paparoa and how it felt very easy for me to be part of that community. People knew each other. I could go out, I could join clubs. I knew the 2 people that you told anything to and they told everyone. What were the conditions there was actually there was a fabric of long relationships. People could come in and out, but the fabric of relationships and how people related to each other was set. And that in some of the communities that we're working in now, there's not a set fabric of relationships. And that's what we're trying to do. That's weaving. We're trying to make these fabric of relationships strong enough so that people can come and go, but there's a culture already there. And that's one of the reasons why we said that this needs to be urban areas too. We really did think participation culture would be more beneficial in an urban than in a rural, because we felt that that was already there. We don't know whether that's true or not, but that was just our thinking. And so when you start to think about the conditions and you imagine 2,000 people and a group of 3 people not only having to form relationships with themselves, but having to work out how to create enough coverage of this fabric around those 2,000 people that it can be felt and seen, it was very ambitious to think we were going to be able to do that in a year. You know, maybe that's a 5-year project.
Yeah, I love that example you're giving, because I just had a conversation with one of the teams the other day that were in their own little moment of turmoil, because they were noticing people coming to the events they were supporting were locals, but also people being drawn in from other parts of the city. And they were like, oh, but we're supposed to just be focusing on growing connections in this neighborhood. And like, how do we hold that tension? Like, we don't want to exclude people, but we also, you know, we want to focus on this area. And it was kind of similar sort of metaphor what you're describing with the fabric, as we started jamming on this metaphor of a wetland system where there's water flowing through, new water's coming in and out. But if there's not those established raupo, like the reeds that put their roots down and actually stabilise that bed, that's what actually holds the flow of new coming in and out. And I think maybe that's just a way to think about events, is like, yes, people might come in from the outside, but how are we making sure that in this event we're really strengthening those reed roots, the people that are going to be here next time and the people that might be involved in bringing it to life, and making sure that we're not just turning this into a generic event that attracts everybody and suddenly we've lost our reed bed that actually holds all that.
Yeah, and maybe the space in between the events is where we should be putting the most energy.
True. I've been playing with this idea of, you know, I love ecology metaphors. You'll hear me talk about these a lot. This idea of, right when I first met you guys, we're talking about mycelium, the mushrooms, and how, you know, little mushrooms pop up on the forest floor, but underneath the ground, there's all this like web of fine white fibers. And that to me is what you're saying about maybe we need to be focusing on the in-betweens and not so much the events. To me, the events are when the mushroom pops up above the ground, but it's actually all of this activity that's happening under the ground, all this web of information and connection and participation, and then it pops up into something.
And how do the weavers understand the importance of tending to the mycelium underneath? And how do you tend to that in a community?
I think you really hit the nail on the head, is just first becoming aware of it. Even just the way that we talk about reporting, or that we're not focusing all the energy on the events themselves, but we're asking those in-between questions, I think starts to shift the culture of like, this is what we're interested in. We're not as interested in the events themselves. And I think evaluation is part of it as well, because we evaluate what we value, right? And if we're not putting value on that underground stuff, then we start creating these conditions where people are just trying to make big, flashy events.
What are the underground things in a community?
In my mind, there's the bubbling thing of when an idea lands and then it sort of starts percolating. So that in my mind is people talking with each other. You know, someone at the school gate says, oh, so-and-so was saying the other day that they want to set up this. Are you interested in that? Those kind of informal testing the waters.
That's the thing that I think is interesting. We're trying to create fabric, but we're trying to create that network, so that when the spore comes up or the idea comes up, it has a place to land and grow. And we're trying to get hold of, so what does it take to have this network happening? People have to be able to talk to each other. So we have to create some of the places where people can talk to each other. Some of them are already existing. I guess there's some people who will never talk to each other but need information in another way. But unless we can really investigate that and get clear, we could find ourselves just working at the activity level.
At the mushroom level.
Yeah, the mushroom level, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got to get very intentional and have some understanding of what it takes.
Yeah, that's really exciting thinking about that, because I think we've used the term, say, bump spaces, for example. We know that there's something about bump spaces that are really important for being able to cultivate these exchanges of information and connection. We know that school gates are one. We know that community Facebook pages are one. I guess we're trying to add to that the soil in a way, right? Like add to those underground conditions that enable more of those networks to kind of grow and establish.
I keep on thinking about COVID and what happened when we removed things from the system. So when we removed being able to travel outside of your area, you spend a lot more time walking, out on bikes, different things happening. So, we think about what we add to a system in a neighbourhood, but what are some of the things we need to remove from the neighbourhood?
It's like, the root of the word development comes from deveil. What are the layers that we need to remove to allow something to evolve? Convenience, I think, is one. I think when we have all these conveniences, we don't feel the need to kind of go out into these spaces as much.
What would be an example of a convenience?
I guess the fact that you can order your groceries online and have them delivered, that takes you out from going to the local supermarket.
Yeah.
Things remove when we're in a crisis and suddenly we need each other and suddenly those connections start happening very quickly. So I think rather than being at crisis driven, but something else, for example, tapping to the fact that in the Hoonhay Rowley area, so many people have a side hustle. I didn't realize this was a real thing in that community. Lots of people have this little side hustle that they do from home. There's some energy there around sharing your side hustle, and tapping into that creates spaces for that connection. But it might not in other neighbourhoods, like there's something about Hoonhay and side hustles.
Because I sort of think that convenience thing that you've brought up is like, okay, so people want their groceries delivered, they want pre-made meals. That's the idea of the cooking club, really. Oh, you can actually go to this place and cook with other people and have some food to take home. Maybe that's where food co-ops, veggie co-ops could make a comeback because it's actually convenient. You're meeting your social needs, you're meeting your budgetary needs. I like the idea of identifying what are the conveniences and what counter them. I guess that's what I've been thinking a lot about. The forces and the counter forces. How many times do we have to be having those conversations out loud in communities about what's important and how we're going to know whether we're creating change?
Got a bit of a controversial idea. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about sort of the traps of doing big community plans and that, community come together, do that awesome reflection work, make a plan of all the things I want to do, and then it sits on a shelf. And by the time it's printed, things have moved on or the energy's dissipated or whatever. I wonder if there's something about having space where community can come together to do that work around what is meaningful to us, but it's not the place where the plans happen. The plans happen in those little small pockets of people organising things in their own backyards or at the local park. That's where things come into actuality, into something real. But maybe those community planning sessions are more about reflecting on what's meaningful, but not controlling what that's going to look like on the ground. That's up to people in their neighbourhood to activate things in their own ways. What do you think?
I reckon most people don't want to go out to community meetings. I reckon the people who go out to community meetings are a certain type of person, right? And that most people just want to get on with living their lives. And in the process of living their lives, things come up like, oh, wouldn't it be good if we had a place where we could swap books with each other? Or wouldn't it be nice if we activated that park a little bit more? Or wouldn't it be good if we actually just owned one lawnmower? And I think those things come up. And often they just stop there because there isn't the culture of saying, well, yes, and we can make that happen. We want a bench at the end of the road to sit on because it's just a little bit too far for us to walk from here to the shops without there being a rest. We can build that bench. That's just not in our psyche.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying. The small things happen in people's backyards and out on the streets, but we're wanting to rustle up this idea that is possible. In one of the episodes in season 1, we talked about people thinking that other people were going to do things like, oh, bloody get the council to come and do this. Or if only my neighbour would stop doing that, rather than, oh, actually I can do something. But that does take quite a mind shift. Often one of the biggest complaints is, oh, we need to get out and engage with different people and we're just hearing the same voices. And I actually think there's a whole lot of people who aren't wanting to engage. And I was at something recently where someone said, it was Anne Patello was saying, citizens don't just wake up and think, oh, well, as a citizen, I must participate in this and this and this. Kia ora, Anne.
Kia ora, how are you?
Yeah, we're doing this podcast around participation culture, and I must have quoted you, and the producer's going, like, you've quoted this Anne Patello, Who is she? It's great. See if you can get more from her.
I don't remember the quote, but that's all right. I'll own it.
So, Anne, I think I was at a conference with you, and I think you said, as a citizen, I don't wake up and think I must participate in this and this and this.
No, I don't. I think the nostalgia that citizens are focused on the well-being and the activity of society first is wrong. It might have been many years ago because communities were smaller and you could see them and they felt more intimate and personal. But for most of us who live in cities or large towns or in the current economic and social settings, I don't wake up first thing in the morning and think, what's the state of the health of my community? What could I do to add to the benefit of my community? Mostly I wake up and I think, what have I got on today? Am I making enough money today? Are all the people I love okay today? Do all my joints work today? And because I'm a woman of a certain age, I mostly wake up and think I need to go to the toilet right now. So there are lots of things that just distract any attention from the benefits and responsibility for being a part of a community. And so that when we think about wanting people to participate and wanting people to be active sculptors of the place they live, then we need to think about what are the broader settings that make that very difficult. If you need to work 3 jobs to feed your kids, if you've only got 2 jobs, thinking about the state of the roads or the litter on the side of the street or the violence that might occur on your screens every day, it's not going to distract you. The immediacy of the pressure of life now distracts you and takes attention. And so when people like you and I are responsible for building communities and building participation, we have to be real about what the challenges are to that and the benefits are to that. We know that communities experience real benefits in times of environmental and cultural and community challenge. We've seen that over and over again. We know that we've got an underpinning expectation that when the times are tough, people will pitch in, but that's not the same as thinking I'll pitch in. And so I think we need to put more I into community. How can I be part of community? How can I do a little bit and be accepted and feel good about that? I can't change the whole world, so I have to work on the bits where I can nudge the bits I touch, and that's good enough.
Kia ora, thank you, Anne. We're just trying to create spaces where people come together and feel able to do things that matter in that moment, not have a list of things that matters in that moment that don't get activated.
A list of things that they're allowed to worry about in that moment.
And if we think about that and think about how hard that is then for our teams of weavers out in their communities trying to work with something that's invisible, something that they can't measure, something that there's a reporting pressure on.
And I think for a lot of them as well, going through that own inner turmoil that I think we've all experienced as well, of how to also notice your own internal magnets of what you feel is your strength and how to explore a different part of yourself that maybe slows things down or holds space rather than drives things forward. Or
I thought there was this moment where we're all sort of in the middle of it, and then we run this session called Zoom In on Participation where Hamish, Marie and myself hosted a Zoom where our weavers attended, but also other people who were dabbling with participation culture from around Aotearoa. So there's maybe 15 of us online, and people are given the opportunity to reflect their work back to the group. And I thought at that moment, the weavers could really feel the significance of the body of work that they're doing, but only because they could see that in relationship to other people doing that work. So suddenly it seemed to me, we're years ahead. We're doing really great stuff. We've really got hold of this. We've got some principles. People are wanting to hear from the weavers about how to do this in their community. So for this moment, their expertise, their wisdom was very alive and well. And so sometimes you can't feel what you're doing until you're removed from where you are and put in a situation where that can be reflected back to you.
Yeah, that's such a good point. like to be able to see your own growth journey in a way, or see what you've managed to shift in yourself and your work.
Yeah, the difference between being in it and then being on top of it. Because I did think to myself, oh, well, I'm not so sure how useful this was for weavers in terms of getting new ideas. And then I thought, actually, they've really shone. This has been very useful because they can feel their own authority, their own expertise, their own experiences. I guess that's maybe the thing for us. We can sit here, I'm in so much turmoil. But actually, we've got hold of some really good ideas and principles about what it takes to look at seeding, growing, flourishing, participation culture.
I wonder if, going back to what we were saying right at the beginning about sitting with the turmoil, sitting in that kind of grey space that can be quite stressful, maybe there's a secret ingredient in there that's around celebration. Because I think that was a moment of celebration for those weavers, feeling what they had accomplished, what had grown in them, what they'd managed to grow through their mahi.
I was just looking at what celebration means. A joyful occasion. It is important, isn't it? To stop and feel joyful.
Yeah, as a counterbalance to that anxiety from being in the turmoil.
Well, that's the discussion on turmoil. That felt like it was full of turmoil. And we're going to look at our next episode about the more pragmatic approach. What does it take to keep the tension and the turmoil and the joy and the celebration all in balance? So if you're interested in pragmatism, join us for episode 3. And until then, I'm going to say ka kite.
Ka kite.
Thanks goes to 104.6 Planet FM Community Access Radio Auckland for their excellent recording studio and guidance in producing this podcast. The music is Pistoriosis by Shane Ivers of soundmanmusic.com, Mal Johannesson for bringing together draft episodes, Mish Maskol for their audio engineering expertise, and our weavers Libby, Jalen, Charles, Tui, Nay, Holly, Lisa, Ray and Carol.
With additional music by Snake and Bongo and Afrobot. Final sound production and mix by Barney Duncan.